So, drugs. Some people say they're pretty cool. Other people disagree and say, actually, drugs are not really that cool at all, and in fact, they are destroying the very foundations of our society. These conflicting opinions, more or less, have caused the decades-long drug war and/or war on drugs that continues to ravage American cities. When it comes to politics, some major issues affect certain groups of people way more than others. For example, abortion laws tend to affect women way more than men. Immigration laws tend to affect illegal immigrants way more than legal citizens, and incest laws affect Alabama more than the other 49 states. And Mississippi, don't laugh at that joke too hard. But drugs are one of the few things that affect all creeds, colors, genders, and religions pretty equally. Pretty much all of us know drug addicts or people who haven't realized they're addicts. Hell, some of us even are drug addicts ourselves. Anyone who has spent any meaningful amount of time in American cities has probably seen junkies hitting the drug fiend lean on a street corner before, or they know people who regularly partake in selling or buying illegal substances. We all have first, second, or even third-hand knowledge of the damage that drugs, drug trafficking, and drug addiction can cause, and we all know how complicated resolving those issues can be. But is it really that complicated? Can all of this country's major drug problems be solved with just one simple action? That simple action being legalizing drugs.
That's crazy. So crazy it just might work.
A question that I have wondered about but had never seen depicted on screen until I watched the third season of The Wire. I really enjoyed the first two seasons of The Wire a lot. They were great seasons of television that both entertained and educated me about the issues that needed to be solved in our world. But season 3 of The Wire was the first time that the show really made me question my worldview and inspired me to consider things about the world and society that I had only really scratched the surface of previously. Crime and corruption are the main through lines of each season of The Wire, but every season focuses on different aspects of crime and corruption within the city of Baltimore. Season 1 focuses on the cops and the gangs. Season 2 focuses on the working class of America. Season 4 focuses on the schools and the kids who grew up in those inner city environments. And Season 5 focuses on the news and the media who report on all of this crime and corruption. But Season 3 is kind of like an amalgamation of all of these topics. Season 3 is arguably the most dense season of the show in terms of the subject matter and the societal issues and systems that it tackles. Season 3 is like if you took all of the other seasons of the show and injected them with crack, HGH, MDMA, bath salts, and whatever that Bane from the Batman cartoons was constantly mainlining into every orifice of his body. Similar to Season 1, Season 3 focuses heavily on the cops and the struggles that they face with trying to appease their bosses and the citizens that they're sworn to serve and protect. But it also manages to give a large amount of screen time to the fall of House Barksdale and what it's like for one crime empire to fall as another one rises to take its place. But it also focuses heavily on the political side of things for the first time in the show, with the great white hope himself, Tommy Carcetti, and his meteoric rise through the ranks of Baltimore's local government, which eventually leads to his bid for mayor of the city. But wait again, because Season 3 also finds time to show us a glimpse of what it's like working with the kids of a decaying city like Baltimore with the new character Cuddy and his fun-time boxing camp story arc. Where Season 2, as great as it is, felt like a sort of departure from the tone and topics of Season 1, Season 3 feels like the true sequel to the show's original storylines that the fans were asking for. Season 3 wraps up pretty much every plot thread that started in Season 1, and it also pushes the story towards its next big arc with Marlowe and House Stanfield taking the reins of Baltimore Street from Avon, Stringer, and House Barksdale. And if that's not enough Season 3 glazing for you, I also cannot forget to mention that the theme song for this season goes absolutely stupid.
He got fire in the fury at his command. Well, you don't have to worry. Hold on to Jesus' hands. Oh.
It sounds like some goddamn New Orleans voodoo jazz ritual music or something. Does it fit the aesthetic of a crime show set in Baltimore, Maryland like the previous two seasons' themes do? Not really, no. But that shit still slaps like a pimp's palm, so it gets a pass for me. In my season 1 video, I made sure to cover pretty much everything of importance in each individual episode of that season. And in my season 2 video, I didn't really see much importance in anything outside of the Sabatka clan storyline, so I only really focused on that aspect of the story. But for season 3, there is so much important to talk about and so many pivotal characters and moments to focus on that if I made this video about all of those important storylines, characters, and events, this video would probably end up being like 3 hours long. I'm talking special edition director's cut of Lord of the Rings movies long. And no matter how much some of you might claim to like the sound of my voice, I cannot imagine anyone finding 3 straight hours of me talking about Carcetti's dollar store JFK persona, or Cuddy's crazy bug-eyed 1,000-yard stare, or Bunny Colvin's strong as Jim Crow era bald black man-ass cranium captivating enough to justify making a video that long. So instead, this video is going to be about what I consider to be the most interesting and thought-provoking aspect of season 3 of The Wire, because at the end of the day, that's what this retrospective series is supposed to be about, explaining why I believe The Wire is the most important show ever made because of the social and political messages that it depicts and how relevant they still are to our everyday lives today. So that means that as great as Omar and Brother Muzone teaming up to take down Stringer Bell was, it doesn't really add much to that main thesis. But just so we're all clear, that was one of the dopest moments in the history of television. Like, bro, look at these niggas. They could have done a whole buddy cop type of spin-off show with this duo as the focus, and it would have been a hit.
You might not hit me.
This range? And this caliber? Even if I miss, I can't miss.
I admire a man with confidence.
But yeah, unfortunately, this video is not going to discuss Omar and Brother Muzone, nor is it going to analyze Cuddy and his journey from hardened criminal who slaps women in broad daylight.
Hey, look, hold on, girl. We want to do it.
Now we gonna talk.
Lord, please pray for the soul of this bitch and guide my pimp hand and make it strong, Lord, so that she might learn a hoe's place. Amen.
Amen. Yeah.
To a freelance youth counselor who finally figures out how to reach these kids. And I'm also not going to discuss much about Carcetti and his whole white man with a big plan for the black man storyline either. But this also means that, thankfully, I won't have to talk about Daniels leaving his successful black queen of a wife for a mid-ass white woman like Rhonda Perlman. It does mean that we're not going to talk about Perez going full, insert white cop who shot an innocent black man here when he killed a fellow cop and resigned from the force in disgrace. But unfortunately, and trust me, I know how much this sucks to hear because it sucks for me to say, I'm not really going to cover much of Stringer, Avon, and the fall of House Barksdale in this video either.
What did you say, nigga?
Move this man!
This is bullshit.
I know, I'm on bullshit. I have a separate video planned for that whole side of things because not only is that storyline probably my favorite storyline of the show, but I know a lot of fans have a lot of passionate opinions about it as well. And I really do want to engage with you all about Stringer and whether or not he really is a secret dumbass, a true genius, or something in between.
Nah, I appreciate smart. But you gotta know in this game, man, it ain't enough. Know what I mean? Government ain't want you to be organized. Nah, they want you scrimping and scraping and killing each other on the corner on some bullshit. Now, when they come get you, that straw purchase out there gonna come bite you in the ass, boy. That's what they do. They turn your money against you.
And quick side note, since I'm not really going to get a chance to talk about this later in the video, it's so funny for me to watch this show decades after it aired and recognize faces from random and obscure things from my childhood. Like, as soon as I saw Slim Charles and Cuddy together for the first time in season 3, I was like, holy shit. Those are those two guys from that Boys in the Hood video from like 20 years ago.
The boys in the hood sell anything for pride. 5 in the morning on the corner clock.
But I say all of this to make it clear that this video isn't going to be about any of that season 3 goodness. This video is going to be all about one thing and one thing only: the wondrous land of Hamsterdam.
But before, a dope fiend come down here, cop a little something, ain't nary a soul hassling. Hoppers and police, they just let him be.
You see how clean the corners are? In every sector, street traffic is half what it was. Fuck that.
It's
wrong. It's wrong.
Look, they ain't no worse off than when he was all over the map. Now they just in one place is all.
And that place is hell.
It's a good thing, huh?
I'm just saying.
Howard Bunny Colvin is briefly introduced in season 2 of The Wire, but he doesn't truly step into the spotlight until season 3 of the show. He's a longtime major of the Western District of Baltimore's police department, and as he will remind you constantly throughout this season, he's about to retire.
6 months from now, I'm gone. Put in my 30. The only thing gonna be left of me on that job is a 8x11 framed picture on the western hallway. Hey, I got my vacation time, and that's 30 in a couple of months. So if you need me to fall, I'm ready. For 6 months to my 30, I'm out the door on a major's pension. The hell they can do to me.
Are you sure about that?
But before he retires, Bunny, a man who has spent a large portion of his life policing the notoriously mean streets of Baltimore, Maryland, realizes that it's going to take something drastic to bring much-needed change and improvement to the worst parts of Baltimore's inner cities. And that drastic something that Bunny decides to make a reality is the legalization of drugs in Baltimore.
What about you, Bunny?
I don't know. Thought I might legalize drugs.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Now, without context, that probably sounds like a pretty crazy plan, but honestly, even with the full context, it's still nutty as squirrel shit. The origin of Bunny's crazy decision to legalize drugs can all be traced back to the very first moments of season 3. This is when Bodie and Poot watched the literal destruction of the Towers apartment buildings that served as House Barksdale's main base of operations in the first 2 seasons. The loss of the Towers causes a mass displacement of House Barksdale's dealers and leads these dealers to spilling back out onto the street corners of Baltimore. And this ends up being the main catalyst for pretty much all of the major conflicts of season 3. House Barksdale ends up going to war with House Stanfield over which corners to sell on, which then leads to more crime and more murders than the police can handle, which then causes the citizens of Baltimore to demand action from the politicians, which then causes the politicians to demand better of the police, which causes the police to employ more extreme tactics to combat the gangs, and yada yada yada. Somehow, I still blame Ziggy Sabatka for all of this. But back to season 3. The first time we see Bunny Colvin in this season, he's chewing out a couple of the new recruits to the Western District. And you can tell just from his stern tone, straightforward manner of speaking, and ice-cold stare, that he's an old-school, hard-ass motherfucker through and through. And I say that as a compliment. Bunny is from a different era, an era in which police officers were respected within their communities, and the law still meant something to a lot of people. He's lived long enough to see Baltimore slowly degrade into the cesspool of crime and corruption that it is today, and his greatest regret is that he hasn't been able to do anything meaningful to stop this degradation.
The city is worse than when I first came on. So, what does that say about me? About my life?
The sequence at the end of this episode where Cuddy is robbed of a package by a young dealer who doesn't respect the old rules of Cuddy's world, and a different boy on the same block being bold or maybe just stupid enough to try to sell Bunny some drugs despite Bunny clearly being a cop, illustrate this degradation on both sides of the law pretty well. But it's also clear that the issues of Baltimore, at least from Bunny's eyes, are not solely on the shoulders of the new age of criminals. A large part of the blame also lies with the new age of police officers who have forgotten what policing is supposed to be all about. We see the disappointment and frustration that Bunny feels after talking with Herc about why he and his fellow officers used such aggressive tactics and wasted so much time and resources to stop one 14-year-old boy from loitering without even finding any drugs on him.
Using half my district canine in the copter to bring a 14-year-old to bay? What do we learn?
That you can't raise up and run from a drug horn in Sector 1 without my boot finding your ass.
Remember at the end of season 1 where it looked like everything Daniels had tried so hard to instill into Herc and Carver about how to be real police was really going to make a difference and make them better cops? Yeah, me neither. It's also kind of funny to me that we find out in season 3 that McNulty got his start in the police department learning from Bunny Colvin in the Western District, which actually makes more sense than anything else in this entire show.
Fuck the bosses.
He's a boss. Fuck the bosses.
But as I mentioned earlier, the crazy chain of events that all stemmed from the destruction of the towers eventually leads White Boy of the Year Tommy Carcetti to rail against Burrell and Rawls on their inability to stop the alarming rise in crime in Baltimore. And when the mayor starts to get heat about this from the voters, it causes him to make Burrell and Rawls crack down on their police staff to lower the murder rates at all costs. I particularly like this town hall meeting from early on in the season where the people are voicing their concerns about the decaying state of their neighborhoods to the police.
Some nights when we hear these plops, we got to sleep under our beds. I come home from work. I can't even get up my front steps because they occupied by the drug dealers.
I can't promise you it's gonna get any better. We can't lock up the thousands out there on the corners. There'd be no place to put them even if we could.
So, what's the answer?
I'm not sure. But whatever it is, it can't be a lie.
And one thing that I really like about season 3 as a whole is that it perfectly illustrates the very real fact of life that everybody answers to somebody else. Even your boss, who gives you shit and expects an unreasonable standard of performance, most likely is doing so because they have a boss making unreasonable demands of them. Burrell and Rawls feel like the big bad wolves of season 1, but season 3 shows them to be the helpless peons that they really are, cursed to stay tap dancing in the palms of those with greater power than them in order to retain what little shreds of power they managed to get. The bosses isn't just a motto for those at the bottom rungs of the ladder. It's a common mantra at every level.
He says he wants to regroup, determine the most effective course of action.
Translate that for me.
Royce is figuring a way to put all of us in the guillotine and keep the blood from spraying anywhere near the hall.
But because their asses are on the line if crime doesn't magically go down by year's end, Rawls and Burrell start putting immense pressure on the majors of each district to produce some results that the mayor will be satisfied with. And the punishment for failure in this is this.
Is your deputy major present?
Yes, sir.
You now command the Eastern District. Major Taylor, you are relieved.
To say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
Eventually, Rawls and Burrell's fury takes aim at Bunny Colvin and the Western District, which, due to a certain gang war that has recently broken out in his district courtesy of these fine gentlemen here, the number of murders, drug crimes, and other things bad start to drastically spike in the Western District. Things get especially bad when one of Bunny's cops gets shot trying to go undercover to catch some local dealers. Bunny's very crazy but potentially genius idea of legalizing drugs is sort of foreshadowed in the previous episode when Bunny gives this long speech to his district officers about the origin of the paper bag over the bottle trick, and more importantly, what that represented in regards to the law enforcement to criminal dynamic back in the day.
The city council had just passed a law that forbid alcoholic consumption in public places. But the corner is, and it was, and it always will be, the poor man's lounge. Western cops rolling by, what were they gonna do? They arrested every dude out there for tipping back a high life. There'd be no other time for any other kind of police work. Some nameless smokehound who comes out to cut rate one day, and on his way to the corner, he slips that just bought pint of elderberry into a paper bag. That small, wrinkled-ass paper bag allowed the corner boys to have their drink in peace, and it gave us permission to go and do police work. The kind of police work that's worth actually taking a bullet for. There's never been a paper bag for drugs.
This whole cop versus dealer dynamic is very interesting to me because, as the hunters in the equation, Season 3 shows how cops like Herc and Carver can lose the plot, as the kids say, and start to focus more on trying to arrest dealers rather than focusing on what arresting the dealers is supposed to do in the long run, which is to actually improve the neighborhood and make the places safer. The presence of drug dealers and drug users in a community can lead to more dangerous crimes, and that is indisputable. But treating the users and the sellers of those drugs as the root of the problem and not a byproduct of the profound poverty and oppression that those people face, well, that's how you lose the plot, as the kids say. The war on drugs in America has arguably done more harm to the communities afflicted with mass drug addiction than the actual drugs that we're supposed to be warring against. But it feels like police nowadays, and well, really the last 30 years, are trained to treat these people as if they're outsiders to their own community, which is rarely the case. But that's Bunny's plan. Legalize drugs in Baltimore to save the neighborhoods from all this violence and destruction. Sounds easy enough, but there is one kind of big problem. Bunny Colvin is just a small-time police officer in a sea of higher-ranking officers, city officials, and federal laws that would stop his plan from happening in a fucking heartbeat. So what is a grown-ass man nicknamed Bunny for some reason to do? Well, he could admit defeat and retire, as he plans to do anyway, and let this whole thing be the next guy's problem. Or he could do what a real nigga would do and go forward with his plan to legalize drugs in this district, but just, not tell anyone who could possibly shut it down. And as anyone who's watched The Wire knows, Bunny Colvin is as real as it gets.
You on the corner in my district? It ain't gonna be about no humble, ain't gonna be about no loitering charge, nothing like that. There's gonna be some biblical shit happening to you on the way to that motherfucking jail wagon, you understand me?
So you know damn well that he went with the latter. The way Bunny and the Western District go about accomplishing this is that they set up a few free zones in abandoned areas of Baltimore and tell local dealers that as long as they sell drugs in these free zones, the cops won't arrest them for any drug-related crimes, and the users that they sell to will be able to buy and use the drugs in peace. At first, the cops struggled to convince the local dealers to agree to this plan that admittedly sounds way too good to be true. But the police eventually convinced the higher-ups within the different gangs to agree to this deal, and they tell their lower-level dealers to move their asses to the free zones. These free zones are eventually dubbed Hamsterdam after a funny misunderstanding of a cop telling one of the dealers that these areas would basically be like Amsterdam in Europe. And some inner-city Baltimore kids who have probably never even left the East Coast of America don't understand the reference, so they think he's saying Hamsterdam.
Vincent Street is like Switzerland. Or Amsterdam.
The fuck is that? It's one of those countries where drugs are legal. We supposed to set up shop here. Hamsterdam.
Yeah, this is it.
And with that, Bunny Colvin's Hamsterdam project is put into motion. And I think this is a good place to point out that up until this point, The Wire felt like a cutting edge and in a certain way, a very groundbreaking show that brilliantly illustrated a lot of the lesser known aspects of crime, corruption, and modern American city life. But everything prior to this felt grounded in reality. Hamsterdam feels like the first major aspect of the series that's truly outlandish, for lack of a better term, and would probably never happen in the real world, or at least not in any American cities like Baltimore. And I could imagine that there are certain people who wouldn't really vibe with this whole Hamsterdam story arc because of those reasons. But for me, this is when the show truly became solidified as one of my favorite things ever. I think the most well-known instance of a society legalizing drugs happened in the country of Portugal back in 2001. And to be specific, this was not a complete legalization of all drugs, but it was defined as decriminalizing drugs, which basically means that all drugs were legal to carry in small amounts. So if you're walking the streets of Portugal with no more than a Skittles bag worth of crack on your person, the cops can't do shit about it. But 20 plus years since Portugal decriminalized drugs, the country has seen mostly positive outcomes from this decision. Drug crime rates are obviously down by a tremendous amount, but drug use rates among younger users aged 15 to 34 are apparently also down and well below the European average. Decriminalizing drugs allowed the country to change the way they looked at drugs and drug addicts from a crime issue to a health issue. And this led to more emphasis on funding medical outreach to addicts and setting up facilities and organizations dedicated to treating junkies on the street rather than arresting them. Portugal has stood as a pretty solid example of how to properly combat drug addiction and drug trafficking within a modern society. But trust me, I'm not naive enough to believe that just because something like this worked in Portugal means that it would work as well in America. But it would be nice to see our government try anything other than what the fuck it's been doing for the last 40 years or so. And throughout this season, The Wire goes into the practicality of maintaining and sustaining a project of this magnitude. Bunny has to make sure that his men are on board with his plan, because if any of them jump ship and decide to snitch, which of course Herc's bum ass eventually does, then it means the whole thing could fall apart. And as much as I've given Carver so far in this retrospective series, I do have to say that season 3 is where I started to really turn around on him and started to really appreciate the changes that he was making as a cop and as a man. There's such a meaningful difference in the speech that Carver gives in the beginning of the season here.
So I'm only gonna say this one time. If you march your ass out here right now and put the bracelets on, we will not kick the living shit out of you.
and his actions by the end of the season, with him actually getting involved with the local community and actually trying to reach these kids. And Carver's transformation largely stems from this speech that Bunny gives him, where he basically lets him know that when it comes to being a cop, this nigga is booty cheeks, like straight from a butt. Everything that's wrong with police today can be found in the first 2.5 seasons of Carver.
But from where I sit, you ain't shit when it come to policing. Don't take it personal. It ain't just you, it's all our young police. Whole generation, y'all. I mean, I can send any fool with a badge and a gun up on them corners and jack a crew and grab bottles. And pretty soon, damn near everybody on every corner is your fucking enemy. And soon the neighborhood that you're supposed to be policing, that's just occupied territory. Soldiering and policing, they ain't the same thing. You had your stats, you had your arrests, you had your seizures. But don't none of that amount to shit when you're talking about protecting the neighborhood now. Do it.
As anyone with common sense would be able to predict, Hamsterdam definitely has its issues, especially in the beginning. The cops are there on duty 24/7 to make sure no major crimes happen, but it's basically a lawless land filled with nothing but junkies, drug dealers, and young kids with nothing better to do but to run around unattended. It's a powder keg of violence and chaos just waiting for the spark to set it all off, and the cops have to make sure that that never happens. Bunny is also enlightened to the fact that there needs to be some kind of medical personnel on site in Amsterdam to maintain the health of the drug users, because without some kind of medical body in play, there would eventually be mass casualties from overdoses, viruses, and disease. There are a few slip-ups along the way, a murder here that needs to be covered up, a couple of robberies and kidnappings over there that need to be taken care of very discreetly. But all things considered, Bunny and the Western District eventually get Hamsterdam up and running pretty efficiently. The dealers sell, the junkies buy, and the streets outside of Hamsterdam stay relatively safe and crime-free. The circle of life continues. And for a while, this even appeases Bunny Colvin's bosses, Rawls and Burrell.
Crime is down and no one wants to take any credit. What is wrong with this picture? You don't mind if I have planning and research pull all your CC numbers? Make sure there's not a decimal point missing between the 1 and the 2?
Pull everything, Deputy. That number will stand.
But it's not the practical side of this argument that interests me the most, because in my mind, almost anything can be practical with the right minds and resources behind it. What interests me most about the idea of Hamsterdam and legalizing drugs is the moral aspect of it. So, this might feel like a bit of a tangent, but I promise it'll come back around to The Wire and to Hamsterdam. One of my favorite video game series from back in the day was the Assassin's Creed series. They were the first true open world games that I'd ever played, and that freedom and exploration that they offered blew my pea-sized 13-year-old mind. But all that open world gameplay wasn't what made the series one of my favorites. What I loved most about the Assassin's Creed games was the story of the Assassins versus the Templars, or more broadly put, I was fascinated by the forever relevant moral argument of individual freedom versus structured control. Should people be free to live as they choose, making their own mistakes and living with the consequences, or should we all be kept in line and be forced to live the lives a higher power has deemed appropriate for us while remaining legally guarded from life's greatest temptations? And it's that same moral argument that's at the core of Hamsterdam, and really at the core of so many issues in The Wire and our everyday lives. See? I told you I'd bring that back around. But at this point in time, in the big 2026, it seems almost impossible to fathom that any adult Western person would be unaware of the dangers of hard drugs. We all grew up with the DARE program and those freaky-ass anti-drug commercials, and I can't forget to mention those special sitcom episodes where one of the characters would randomly start doing speed or some shit like that, and then pass out or have a mental breakdown singing a song from the 80s. You know the ones. The risks are very well documented for anyone choosing to partake in drug-related activities. Yet, so many people still choose drug-related activities. I myself still drink alcohol despite alcoholism and drug addiction running in both sides of my family. But what can I say? I also chose to bet my financial future on making YouTube videos for a living, so clearly I have a thing for living dangerously. But still, that's my choice, and if I someday end up homeless and drunk off my ass on a park bench screaming at rabid squirrels that I for some reason think are my estranged children, then that's on me. I knew the risks and I chose to take them. That should be my right to do so. Or at least that's what I believe. Team Assassin all the way. It's the same thing with selling drugs or joining gangs. Countless TV shows and movies like The Wire have pretty accurately illustrated the dangers that come with that lifestyle. So there's really no reason why someone would get involved with that kind of life and not expect to be shot at, chased by police, and whatever crazy BS comes with the game. But yet, people still choose that all the time. If left completely unattended to, these dealers and addicts could very well destroy a community. They can make neighborhoods unsafe, unpleasant, and borderline unlivable for the residents of that neighborhood. Harsh drug laws and harsh laws on gang crime have done little to deter or hinder people like this from participating in these kinds of activities. So what else could work in terms of removing these dangers from our lives? Well, in the words of a big pink starfish, why don't we just take the junkies and dealers and move them somewhere else? Throw them all together in a magic land of shared needles and endless dirty money. Well, yeah, why don't we just do that? To answer my own question, the reason we don't do that is because many people think it is morally unacceptable to do so. Hamsterdam doesn't fail because it was impractical and unable to sustain itself. I mean, it definitely had a shaky start, but once they ironed out the kinks, it was running pretty much as intended with little to no downsides or slip-ups. Hamsterdam failed because once word got out that it existed, everyone above Bunny Colvin feared the repercussions from the voters, from the federal government, and from whatever other outside forces could get them fired or arrested for allowing Hamsterdam to continue. Even someone who's a proponent of Hamsterdam has to admit that Hamsterdam was hell. The sequence of bubbles wandering through one of the free zones at night felt like something out of a post-apocalyptic zombie movie. It was really chilling stuff, especially seeing Bubbles' longtime friend and partner in drug-addicted crime, Johnny, literally die in Hamsterdam in a way so disgusting and sad that the cops couldn't even tell what he had died from because of all of the rat bites and various other injuries and infections all over his body. But if we're being honest with ourselves, I think we can all admit that Hamsterdam is far from the only hellscape in this world. Prison is hell. War zones are hell. Any comedy show where Cedric the Entertainer is performing is hell. Hell does exist on this earth, and in the case of a place like prison, can be a very necessary evil, or in regards to war, they could be a seemingly unavoidable evil, but we abide them all the same. So if these other hellscapes can exist, why is it that there can't be a place for those who choose to engage in drug dealing and drug use to do so without hindrance from the law and create their own personal hells away from those who choose not to indulge in those lifestyles? People should be allowed to throw their lives away if they choose, and law enforcement shouldn't have to be preoccupied with policing people's individual choices in the matter. Police should be protecting people from the real threats: thieves, murderers, assholes who ride their motorcycles in large numbers through residential areas. Those people should be publicly stoned to death, probably. I don't know, I'm just spitballing. Bunny Colvin made this a reality, but his reward for daring to do what needed to be done but what no one else had the cojones to do is that he gets screwed out of his retirement plan by Rawls and Burrell, and he's demoted and made to resign in dishonor for his actions.
After Comstat, you go to retirement services and drop papers, going out at a lieutenant's grade. That's right, you're busted back.
You're out today at the lower grade.
That's against the goddamn contract.
What part of Bendover didn't you understand?
But honestly, who didn't see that coming? Somehow not Bunny, apparently. Season 3 ends with Hamsterdam being destroyed and all of the dealers and the addicts going back to the street corners from whence they came, bringing destruction and decay back to the neighborhoods that Bunny risks his entire career to save. One of my favorite moments of the season is when Bunny is taking Carcetti through the Western District, and he eventually brings him along to the same town hall meeting that occurred earlier in the season. But this town hall meeting takes place well into Hamsterdam's run, and you can see the number of people at the meeting is considerably larger. The people's moods are much brighter and more cheerful. The problems that they're speaking about are much less severe and insurmountable than they were before. All of this is clear evidence that Hamsterdam is working, and the Western District is starting to heal after the decades of destruction and corruption that ravaged it. And the only price that had to be paid was that some addicts and dealers who had already decided to throw their lives away were sectioned off from society and allowed to run free in their own secluded space. And it might sound harsh to suggest that those people's lives are less important than the lives of those who aren't choosing to do those things, but in the words of a pretty good album title, everybody can't go. It's cliche, but it's true. You can't save everybody. The Wire is a work of fiction. Everything depicted in the show is not real and should not be treated as a true one-to-one example of how the same scenarios would play out in the real world. But as I have said in these videos before, there is no show that I've ever seen that more accurately depicts the real issues of our world through a fictional lens. This world has a lot of really bad problems, obviously. And some of those problems require very complicated and morally gray answers to solve them. But not every problem is so hard to solve, in my opinion. Some problems, like the war on drugs, could be solved pretty simply, but ego, arrogance, ignorance, and ridiculous allegiance to the traditions and practices of old make those simple solutions damn near impossible. I don't know how to implement these changes to get around these roadblocks because I'm just a YouTuber with a liberal arts degree. But I know that there are people out there who can figure those things out. And shows like The Wire that openly discuss topics like these are critically important to inspiring those people to act and make this world a better place. I honestly didn't think much of Bunny Colvin when he was first introduced, but he ended up becoming one of my favorite characters in the entire show. And he's the classic martyr figure who, despite his dedication to the cause, his time was cut short before he could see the meaningful change and revolution he fought so hard for. Bunny Colvin did not manage to permanently change the system the way that he really wanted. But those who came after him carried the torch for his legacy, and even though the fight for revolution is never really over, Bunny was able to tip the scales towards the side of change. And at the end of the day, that's the best any revolutionary can reasonably ask for.
However it ends, you're good police. Like, I just did what I did. Felt right. I'm fine with that.
So that's partially season 3 of The Wire. I really did want to make this video about the entire season, like how I had done with season 1 and mostly with season 2. But like I said earlier in the video, there's just, season 3 is a lot, man. There is so much that happens. Like I said, everything with Stringer and Avon and that whole side of things, with the cops, you know, McNulty trying to get him, get Stringer, and Marlowe coming up and trying to take their spot. All of that could have been the entire season, and it still would have been, you know, a pretty dense and good season of television. But throw in the whole Carcetti stuff, throw in everything that I just went through about Hamsterdam and Bunny Colvin, and with Cuddy, and it's like I said, it is the most dense season of the show. It's kind of perfectly put in, you know, the spectrum of everything, as it's right in the middle, and it feels like the perfect end point of the first half of the story, first half of the series, and the jumping off point for the second half of season 4 and 5. That, like I said, I wish I could say more about everything in season 3, but they'll come in other videos. I'll make, like I said, I really want to make a Stringer Bell video that encapsulates everything from season 1, 2, and 3, and just his whole rise and fall. And how I don't think it's nearly as much his fault as a lot of people, you know, a lot of people say. I think a lot of times he was a victim of circumstance, and I really think, at least in season 3, that Avon's stupidity was far worse than Stringer's. Stringer was stupid in season 2, Avon was stupid in season 3, and Marlowe just kind of Mary Sued his way into, you know, beating both of them by the end. But in terms of, you know, season 3 and Hamsterdam and the video that I actually made, I would love to hear your guys' opinions on it. I feel like I was on my soapbox a lot more in this video than I usually am. Got a little preachy there at the end, especially. But this is something that clearly I'm passionate about, and this story arc in this season really spoke to me, and I thought that this was easily one of the most important storylines of the series. So, like I said, I'm very interested to see what you guys think about this video and everything that I discussed with Hamsterdam and legalizing drugs and all that good hippie shit. But besides that, thank you for watching as always. But yeah, I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.